Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. I want to welcome you to today's webinar on Gender and the Montreal Protocol. My name is Monica Gaba Kapadia. I am a program specialist with UNDP's Montreal Protocol and Chemicals team in New York, and I will introduce this session. In 2019, the Executive Committee of the Multilateral Fund for the Implementation of the Montreal Protocol approved a new operational policy on gender mainstreaming. And as you will hear from our speakers in just a few moments, this new policy shows the importance of gender mainstreaming in MLF-supported projects. Because gender is a new area under the Montreal Protocol, this session will focus on improving the mainstreaming of gender into UNDP's Montreal Protocol projects, and will hopefully provide you with more information on how to apply a gender-responsive approach to activities under the Multilateral Fund. Now, before I introduce our first expert, let me just take care of a few housekeeping announcements. This webinar is being recorded, and both the recording and all speaker presentations will be shared online after this webinar is completed. You can find a link in the chat box where this information will be made available. We are looking forward to an interactive discussion, so I encourage all of you to share your comments and questions in the chat box throughout our webinar, and we will be monitoring the chat box and addressing some of your comments in the Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. Our first two country presentations will be conducted in Spanish. For interpretation into English, please click on the interpretation button on your screen and then choose English. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Hannah Strohmeyer, a UNDP gender consultant who helped to develop the new gender policy of the MLF. She will also moderate the remainder of the session. Hannah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Monica, for the nice introduction, and welcome also from my side to everyone who's here today. It's a pleasure to be with you. Just a few words about myself. I've been working on the intersection on gender and environmental issues for more than 10 years now, including for the UNDP gender team in New York. And I also have a PhD in the area of global health and development with a strong gender focus, actually. I'm speaking to you today from Berlin, Germany, and I would like to start the presentation with a brief video on SDG 5 on achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. Can we have the video, please?
1 second, and you will see the video live on. Please enjoy.
Okay, thank you very much. Now this video already captured some of the important components, such as why it is important to work towards gender equality and what we need to do. Now, before we go into greater detail on these and other topics, let us briefly recap some important gender terms and concepts which will help us to understand this and the following presentations better. Thank you. And the first slide, please. So, obviously, there's a whole range of gender terms and concepts of relevance when we speak about gender equality and women's empowerment. So today, we actually only focus on 3 of these, and these 3 are very essential for this session as a brief refresher. So let's start with sex. So biological sex actually refers to the physical and biological characteristics that distinguish males and females. And it is thus more difficult to change, and sex exists across culture and history. Now, if we look at gender, on the other hand, gender rather refers to the roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a given society at a given time considers appropriate for men and women. Gender also refers to the relations between women and men, and among groups of women and among groups of men. So the important point here is that these attributes, opportunities, and relationships are socially constructed and actually learned through socialization processes. Hence, they are also context and time specific and changeable. Now let's look at gender equality. So gender equality refers to the equality between men and women. So it's in essence about equal rights, responsibilities, and opportunities of women and men. And it's really important for us to remember that gender equality is not a women's issue only, but it actually concerns and should fully engage both women and men. Now, finally, gender mainstreaming, which I'm sure all of you have heard so many times. Gender mainstreaming is the intergovernmentally agreed global strategy for achieving the goal of gender equality. So gender mainstreaming is in fact a way to make women's as well as men's concerns and experiences an integral dimension of any intervention so that both of them can benefit equally and inequalities are not perpetuated. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay. So let us look a little bit more in detail into reasons for and benefits of gender mainstreaming. Now, very obviously, there's a whole range and many reasons to mainstream gender. And it is well proven that doing so actually has significant and far-reaching benefits for individuals, but also for communities, households, and societies as a whole. So, and these reasons include the area of justice and equality, efficiency and sustainability, credibility and accountability, long-term institutional and structural changes, the quality of life of people, and the formation of alliances. Now, let me give you a brief example to break down a little bit what I just said and make these arguments a bit more practical and accessible. So the qualitative and quantitative evidence we meanwhile have that gender equality, which, as we just heard again, is the end goal of gender mainstreaming, drives development progress is overwhelming. So amongst many studies from the UN and also academic institutions, recent research undertaken by McKinsey has shown that tackling the global gender gap will boost global GDP significantly, that companies that are gender and ethnically diverse outperform their peers. And this research and follow-up studies have also shown the strong need for all stakeholders to work together to maintain and actually accelerate progress on gender equality. So this includes national governments, companies, organizations, but of course also individuals themselves. Now, so these findings relate not only, but particularly to the arguments of efficiency and sustainability, institutional and structural change, the quality of life, and the formation of alliances. Now, since our key focus today is gender and the Montreal Protocol, and therefore, of course, also the MLF gender policy, I would now like to share a little bit of more information with you about the relation of gender and gender mainstreaming and the justice and equality and rights-based argument. Next slide, please. So, justice and equality and the legal and policy framework for gender mainstreaming. Now, if we look at the left side of the table, we have a lot of global, regional, and national level frameworks and instruments in place that require stakeholders, and in particular countries, to enhance gender equality and women's empowerment. So there's of course many more documents than the ones listed on this slide, but nevertheless, the ones that we see here are very important examples that guide the global work on gender equality and women's empowerment. So CEDAW, which stands for the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, was adopted in 1979 by the General Assembly. So up to this date, we have 189 countries who have ratified the convention. And sometimes CEDAW is also referred to as Women's Bills of Rights. And that is because it is exclusively devoted to gender equality. And it is the document in which the nature of sex-based discrimination and gender equality is articulated most clearly. So important to know is that CEDAW is actually also legally binding. Now then, if we look at the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, we can say that it was adopted by governments in 1995. And it actually formulates 12 so-called critical areas of concern. And one of these critical areas of concern is actually on women and the environment. So this instrument also hence strongly relates to the kind of work we are doing. Now, of course, SDG 5, we are familiar with it. We watched just a video on it. It aims at achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. Now, all of these instruments are actually global instruments. And the Maputo Protocol is one example of a regional human rights instrument that guarantees comprehensive agreements, comprehensive rights to women. And of course, then countries themselves usually have gender policies and gender strategies in place that support the work on gender. Now, if we look at the right side of the table, we also have the organizational level. So this means that organizations such as the implementing agencies of the Montreal Protocol, like UNDP, UNEP, UNIDO, and the World Bank have their own gender strategies and policies in place. We have UN system-wide accountability mechanisms. And we, of course, have the MLF, who, as Monica said at the beginning, also has now approved a gender policy. So let's talk a little bit more about the MLF gender policy. The next slide, please. So the operational policy on gender mainstreaming for MLF supported projects was actually approved at the meeting of at the 84th meeting in 2019. And so this gender policy is more or less a shorter version of a draft policy that was developed by the Secretariat in collaboration with bilateral and implementing agencies before this meeting. So this draft policy is a rather comprehensive document, which you still find online. And it is good to know about this because this more comprehensive document actually does include a lot of different tools for gender mainstreaming, such as a set of indicators, gender mainstreaming checklists, which may be of help to you. Now, the actual gender policy you find as Annex 30 of the meeting report of the 84th meeting. Now, what is the objective of the approved gender policy? So the objective of this policy is to contribute to the achievement of gender equality and women's empowerment. And what does it say about the implementation? So the implementation is actually a shared responsibility of the Executive Committee, the Multilateral Fund Secretariat, the bilateral and implementing agencies, as well as the national ozone units of Article 5 countries. And the policy also specifies very clearly that given that the projects funded under the MLF are implemented through bilateral and implementing agencies, which, as we also said earlier, have their own gender policies, This particular policy is designed to ensure that existing gender policies are implemented systematically in the context of multilateral fund-supported projects. Now, what does all of this mean in practice? So first, it signals very clearly that the MLF recognizes the importance of gender mainstreaming. Of course, secondly, it also shows very clearly that it requires plenty of different actors and stakeholders and really concerted joint efforts to work towards gender equality and women's empowerment. And thirdly, it means that there's a very close connection between the MLF gender policy and those policies and requirements formulated by implementing agencies. So giving a brief example from UNDP, this actually means that any intervention supported by UNDP, no matter where the money comes from, must still follow UNDP gender policies and requirements, which may even exceed those set by financing partners. So for instance, one requirement set by UNDP is that gender analysis is required for every program and project. So this is something for everyone to remember in this context. The next slide, please. Okay, so let us look in greater detail on what the gender policy actually tells us in terms of action. So the policy identifies 3 key areas of action. So the first key area for action is on developing tools to facilitate gender mainstreaming throughout the whole project cycle. So these tools, such as tailored manuals for gender mainstreaming in Montreal Protocol projects, are intended to really help and institutionalize gender mainstreaming and bring a system to it, which of course then still can be adjusted to the specific country and project context. So one example for such a tool is the UNIDO Guide on Gender Mainstreaming for Montreal Protocol projects, which was developed in 2015. So this tool includes a lot of resources, a lot of checklists, guidance for TORs, for gender experts, etc. So this is an example. And again, also, as I mentioned earlier, the draft gender policy of the MLF also includes some relevant tools that may be of help for you. But of course, it is still important to keep building on these existing tools so that we continuously keep improving our mainstreaming efforts and keep improving and building on gender results. Now, the second key area emphasizes the need to consider and address gender equality and women's empowerment systematically in all projects prepared to phase out and phase down controlled substances for Article 5 countries in all phases of the project cycle. So I think this second key area is pretty self-explanatory, so I will not go into great detail on this, but move to the third key area. So the third key area focuses on the delivering of capacity building for bilateral and implementing agencies and partners and Article 5 countries to actually facilitate gender mainstreaming. So as you know, capacity building can take on very different forms. It can be formal multiple-day training workshops, but also webinar sessions like the one we are actually holding today can have a great impact and support us in our joint efforts. So now what I would like to add, and what is not listed on the slide, is that the operational policy also states that it can be assessed based on progress on these 3 key areas, as well as quantitative and qualitative indicators to be provided by the bilateral and implementing agencies in their annual reports. And the policy also includes a provision that it can be reviewed and revised by the executive committee based on need. The next slide, please. So now, of course, a key question is, what can we do? So here's some suggestions for low-cost gender activities that are actually also aligned to the 3 key areas of action. So in essence, you see 3 stages of the project cycle, and then some examples for gender activities. And the point here is also to let you know that gender work does not always have to be extremely costly, and that it's extremely important and powerful to consider from the start of every project cycle. So for instance, if you start the project preparation, you usually undertake a lot of assessment work. So it's important to consider gender already there, and this can take on different forms. So it's always good to consult with a gender expert or a gender focal point who has the required expertise and who can help you structure your assessment in a way that it includes, for instance, particular questions that assess the impacts or the expected impacts on women and men, that it's designed in a way to collect data disaggregated by sex. And that also you make sure that when you actually interview your beneficiaries or stakeholders, collaborating partners, you make sure you talk to women and men. Then when you hire people for these assessments and other work related to the project, it is really important to consider gender parity in your recruitment processes. And actually equal pay for equal work is quite an important component here too to think of. It's important throughout to work with gender focal points. Oftentimes ministries have these. There's also usually units or departments working on gender and women's empowerment. And it's important to consult with them and collaborate with them from the start. Now then, during the implementation phase, it's also really important actually to make sure that your project staff have the required gender competence. And why is that important? It's important because if you have the required gender competence, you can, while you are going along, consistently monitor and actually check what are the impacts on women and men, where do we have potential gender problems or concerns, and how could these be addressed, where are the entry points. It's also very important and has shown very effective actually to create databases or expert pools with qualified female candidates, especially given that environmental issues are oftentimes an area which are highly male dominated. Of course, it's also really important to make gender an integral part of any capacity building and training initiative. And a lot of the projects that you're working on actually have huge capacity building components. So it's important to actively discuss gender to make sure that any data you present, where applicable, is disaggregated by sex, that you make sure that you hire women as trainers. It can also be things like when you portray visuals, make sure you don't just show pictures of men at work. We actually do see that at times. So these kind of things are very practical activities that are very powerful. And you can also take affirmative actions such as planning and implementing particular training workshops specifically for women. And then when you monitor and report, please always make sure that you report the impacts your project is having and the progress you are making with regards to gender and disaggregated by sex. So when you present data, present it disaggregated by sex, and also provide some more qualitative components, a narrative that makes it very clear what you have done and what you have achieved with regards to gender, because that, of course, will also help us creating baselines and improving over time. The next slide, please. So here's some more general, but really also important reminders. So it is really important to keep reminding ourselves that we actually can work and improve gender equality and women's empowerment each and every day. So we can do this, for instance, by making sure to use gender inclusive language, which means, in essence, speaking and writing in a way that does not discriminate against a particular sex, social gender, or gender identity, and that does not perpetuate existing gender stereotypes. And you see two of these stereotypes that are actually still quite widespread on the right side of the slide. It is also very important that when we encounter such stereotypes that we speak up against them and that we use any opportunity we have to advocate for gender equality among our colleagues and collaboration partners. Next slide, please. So coming closer to the end of my part of today's webinar's presentation, I would just quickly like to introduce some useful resources to you. So if you would like to deepen or broaden or refresh your gender knowledge, the UN Women Training Center actually is always a very good address to go to. So there you find a whole range of freely available self-paced training courses. And they also have training courses related specifically to gender and environmental issues. You also find a huge gender glossary. So in case you would like to learn more about certain gender concepts or terms, you are very likely to find some good explanations there. And they also have bibliographies of very relevant gender training manuals, checklists and tools that may be of great help to you. Now then, another resource is the report UNDP commissioned in 2018, which is a gender analysis and an action plan for MP projects in China, Peru, and Nigeria, which is also available online. It may be helpful for you to go and take a look at this document, as you may be able to take some of the findings and recommendations and adjust them to your particular project and country context. And I think in the presentations that will follow mine, we will also hear some of these findings and recommendations. And then last but definitely not least, I mentioned also before this, the UNIDO Guide on Gender Mainstreaming in Montreal Project from 2015. So now, what about the way forward? So we have already planned follow-up webinar sessions for fall and winter this year. And we will use these sessions to focus a little bit more in detail on UNDP's particular approach to gender mainstreaming and MP projects. And we will also use these follow-up webinar sessions to address some remaining questions we may not be able to attend to today, and potentially some new questions and comments you may have the coming months, which you would like to share with us. And so yeah, with this, I think I have reached the end of my presentation. And I would like to thank you very much for your attention. And I would now like to give the floor to the colleagues Iris Vegas from the Peruvian Association of Refrigeration and Vladimir Alcides Lozano Cotera from the Ministry of Production in Peru, who have kindly agreed to share with us some information and lessons from their experience with gender mainstreaming. And I look forward to your presentation. Over to you.
Colegas Iris y Vladimir, la atención está sobre ustedes, el foro es suyo. Solo antes de que empiecen con su ponencia, comentarles que Diana va a traducir de forma consecutiva en vez de simultáneo. Entonces, si pueden hablar a un ritmo, digamos, un poco más despacio y con frases cortas, se los vamos a agradecer mucho. Inicia. ¿Quién inicia?
Muy buenos días.
Good morning, everyone.
Muy buenos días con todos. Bueno, siguiente, por favor.
Next slide, please.
El Perú del Bicentenario necesita y merece una producción innovadora, inclusiva y sostenible a largo plazo. El Ministerio de la Producción, a través de la Dirección General de Asuntos Ambientales de Industria, es la autoridad competente para la implementación del Protocolo de Montreal en el Perú. Desde el Ministerio de la Producción venimos trabajando en iniciativas que incorpore y llegue a los más vulnerables, que amplifique el impacto de la innovación en solucionar nuestros retos más urgentes y que lo haga de forma sostenida y en armonía con el medio ambiente.
Gracias, Vladimir. Te voy a detener para que Diana pueda traducir.
The Peru of the bicentennial needs and deserves an innovative, inclusive, and sustainable production in the long term. The Ministry of Production, through the General Directorate of Environmental Affairs of Industry, is the competent authority for the implementation of the Montreal Protocol in Peru. From the Ministry of Production, we have been working on initiatives that incorporate and reach the most vulnerable, that amplify the impact of innovation in solving our most urgent challenges, and that do so in a sustained manner and in harmony with the environment.
Adelante.
En el marco de dicho protocolo, nos encontramos ejecutando el proyecto Plan de Gestión de Eliminación de los Hidroclorofluorocarbonos, PGEH Fase 2 para el Perú, con el apoyo del Programa de las Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo.
Within the framework of the protocol, we are implementing the hydrochlorofluorocarbons Phase 2 Phase-Out Management Plan for Peru project with the support of the United Nations Development Program.
Siguiente, por favor. El objetivo de este proyecto es apoyar al Perú en el cumplimiento de los compromisos de reducción de los HCFC. Para el año 2020 obtuvimos la reducción del 35%, fue una meta cumplida. Para el año 2025 nuestra meta es reducir al 67.5% y vamos por muy buen camino.
The objective of this project is to reduce the amount of hydrochlorofluorocarbons in Peru. By the year 2020, we achieved to reduce the amount of hydrochlorofluorocarbons by 35%. And our goal for 2025 is to reduce the hydrochlorofluorocarbons by 67.5%, and we're on good track so far.
La agencia implementadora PNUC nos brinda asistencia técnica en el desarrollo de un programa de capacitación inclusivo para técnicos en refrigeración y aire acondicionado. Nosotros como Produce estamos trabajando en el fortalecimiento de capacidades de actores clave del sector refrigeración, con enfoque de innovación, sostenibilidad y principalmente inclusión, empoderando a las mujeres de la industria de la refrigeración.
UNDP as an implementing agency provides technical assistance in the development of an inclusive training program for refrigeration and air conditioning technicians. Produce has helped develop some actions such as capacity building of key actors in the refrigeration sector, and we have focused on innovation, sustainability, and inclusion. We also focus on the empowerment of women in the refrigeration industry.
Este trabajo contribuye a promover las buenas prácticas ambientales en el sector de la refrigeración, con la finalidad de sumar esfuerzos en la preservación de la capa de ozono y a generar herramientas para el empoderamiento y posicionamiento profesional de la mujer en un sector técnico tradicionalmente masculino.
This work contributes to promote good environmental practices in the refrigeration sector in order to join efforts in the preservation of the ozone layer and to generate tools for the empowerment and professional positioning of women in a traditionally male-dominated sector.
Siguiente, por favor. Los principales resultados que tenemos es que hemos obtenido a 20 técnicas y 2 instructoras capacitadas. Tenemos un taller anual exclusivo para técnicas. 3 técnicas peruanas han sido reconocidas por el PNUC en el evento del 2019. Y tenemos un impacto positivo en ámbitos económicos, generación de microempresas. En el tema formativo estamos trabajando en la profesionalización y familiar, oportunidad en tiempos de pandemia.
Some results that we've achieved include the training of 2 technicians, 1 annual workshop for technicians, and the recognition of 3 Peruvian technicians by UNDP. And we've also achieved a positive impact on the economy through the generation of micro enterprises, and a positive impact on the educational sector through professionalization, and also helped positively impact families through giving them opportunities in these times of pandemic.
Estos resultados no se hubiesen obtenido sin contar con los socios estratégicos. Identificamos a la Asociación de Técnicos en Refrigeración, institutos de educación técnica y el sector privado, empresas de refrigeración y tomadores de sus servicios.
These efforts were achieved thanks to our strategic partners, and our strategic partners are the Association of Refrigeration Technicians, the Technical Education Institutes, and the private sector, which includes refrigeration companies and the customers of their services.
Como puede apreciarse, los esfuerzos realizados bajo la implementación del proyecto PGEH Fase 2 han permitido que el Perú venga cumpliendo con los compromisos internacionales asumidos bajo el Protocolo de Montreal, así como han contribuido al fortalecimiento de las capacidades nacionales bajo la promoción de un enfoque de igualdad de género.
As can be seen, the efforts made under the implementation of this project have allowed Peru to comply with international commitments under the Montreal Protocol and have contributed to strengthening national capacities under the promotion of a gender equality approach.
Siguiente. Muchas gracias. Este es un evento que tuvimos con la participación de mujeres y que fue todo un éxito. Saludos desde Perú y desde el Ministerio de la Producción.
Thank you very much. This is a photo of an event that we had with the participation of various women, and greetings from Peru and Produce, the Ministry of Production.
Adelante, Iris, por favor.
Buenos días. Mi nombre es Iris Vega Valverde. Represento a la Asociación Peruana de Refrigeración y Aire Acondicionado Ventilación. Desde mis inicios, hace 4 décadas, pensé de que la mujer no estaba exenta de trabajar y de aprender una carrera no tradicional. Entré al Servicio Nacional de Adiestramiento Técnico Industrial, SENATI.
¿Me permites para que pueda traducir, Diana? Vamos a hacer lo mismo que hicimos con nuestro colega Vladimir, para que Diana pueda traducir. So, Diana, over to you.
Hello, I'm Iris Vega Valverde, and I am part of the Peruvian Association of Refrigeration, of Air Conditioning and Ventilation. And since I started working, I understood that women cannot be accepted from this sector. And I knew this also since I began my studies.
Adelante.
Sí. No fue fácil entrar a esta área técnica que era solamente para varones, pero con capacitaciones, ¿no? Y estudio, llegué a ocupar un sitio con 14 varones en ese instante que estudiaban refrigeración. Llegué a ocupar un espacio.
It wasn't easy to enter this sector because it was dominated by men, but after partaking in different traineeships and studying, I was able to enter this sector, which consisted of 14 men.
Es por ello que generé espacios dentro del sector para que nuevas mujeres se formaran y tuvieran las mismas capacitaciones.
And that is why I generated space within the sector so that women could educate themselves and partake in the same traineeships that men were partaking in.
Buscando que aportar a las nuevas generaciones de frigoristas, nos agrupamos mujeres y varones del mismo sector y se creó la Asociación Peruana de Refrigeración. Y de mano con el Ministerio de la Producción se coorganizó eventos y capacitaciones desde el 2016.
In order to educate the new generation, men and women from this sector made a group and formed the Peruvian Association of Refrigeration. And since 2016, we have been conducting events and different ways to strengthen our capacities.
Desde el 2017 se organizó el primer taller dirigido solo para mujeres frigoristas en el plan de la eliminación de los hidrofluorocarbonados, sustancias que dañan la capa de ozono.
Since 2017, we organized the first workshop only for women to reduce the amount of hydrofluorocarbons, which are substances that damage the ozone layer.
Con la finalidad de fortalecer sus capacidades en el manejo de las buenas prácticas para la eliminación de los hidrofluorocarbonados y conocer también el manejo de los nuevos refrigerantes naturales. La finalidad fue de concientizar y para contribuir en la protección de la capa de ozono.
The goal was to strengthen the capacities and foster good practices, and also to reduce the amount of hydrofluorocarbons and learn more about the different ways to manage the new natural refrigeration, and also to protect the ozone layer.
El proyecto PGE del PNUD contó con un plan de capacitación con la apertura y la descentralización, y por ello se logró realizar talleres también en las ciudades más importantes del país.
The UNDP's project was conducive towards the strengthening of capacities and projects, and we also held workshops in the most important cities of the country.
Se contribuyó con que se organizaran nuevas redes en los diferentes sectores y se impulsó el uso de sustancias amigables con el ambiente, como son los refrigerantes naturales, como el R290, el R600, el CO2 y el amoníaco, y eliminar los hidrofluorocarbonados.
So, thanks to this project, we organized new networks and learned how to use more environmentally friendly substances and eliminate hydrofluorocarbons.
¿Qué falta impulsar en la inclusión de la mujer? Que tenemos que todavía romper estereotipos de origen sociocultural que definen roles y tareas de acuerdo a los países latinoamericanos que estamos muy marcados, en que la mujer debe trabajar en la oficina y no en las áreas técnicas. Todavía nos falta romper, pero nosotros lo estamos consiguiendo. Que a veces por el problema que la mujer tenemos hijos y ya las empresas no nos quieren aceptar cuando ya tenemos hijos.
So some things that are missing in this air conditioning sector in Peru include breaking stereotypes of social cultural origin that define roles and tasks according to sex, and in Latin American countries, which is very marked in what women should or should not work. And this is usually linked to the responsibility in the upbringing of the children that many people link to women.
A veces produce por la ausencia de interés, marginación y bajo estima femenina, derivada de la internacionalización de los estereotipos y los preconceptos sobre su idoneidad técnica, carencia de información adecuada sobre las múltiples alternativas de los carreras técnicas alternativas que solamente son no tradicionales, que solamente son para varones.
The lack of inclusion of women in the air conditioning sector could be attributed to the lack of interest, marginalization, and low feminine self-esteem, which is derived from the internalization of stereotypes and preconceptions about their technical suitability, as well as the lack of adequate information on multiple training alternatives.
Preconceptos sobre las exigencias de condiciones laborables y esfuerzos físicos inaceptables para la mujer, porque generalmente el empresario tiene la idea de que la mujer no tiene el esfuerzo físico para realizar la tarea de refrigeración o aire acondicionado, de arreglar una refrigeradora, de arreglar un aire acondicionado, de ver una cámara frigorífica, pero eso ya se tiene que ir desterrando, porque nosotros las mujeres somos capaces de realizar esas tareas y mejores tal vez que los varones.
In order, another aspect that is impeding the inclusion of women in the air conditioning sector includes the preconceptions about the demand for working conditions and physical efforts that are enough for women. There are also restrictions that and there's also business resistance to the incorporation of female labor, which distrusts their performance in technical areas.
Restricciones y resistencias empresariales para incorporar la mano de obra femenina y desconfianza en su desempeño en las áreas técnicas.
There are restrictions that impede business people from trusting female work in these technical areas.
Pero cada día estamos más organizadas para participar en el proceso del desarrollo económico y la construcción de una sociedad con equidad de género e igualdad de oportunidades.
Every day we're more organized to contribute towards economic development and equity in our society.
Oportunidad que tengo ahora de instalaciones de los hospitales temporales COVID en el área de ventilación y aire y climatización. Y transmitir el mensaje que para ser incluida debemos capacitarnos y demostrar que ese juguete mágico lo podemos dominar. Gracias.
Today I have the opportunity to foresee temporal hospitals, and the message that I want to deliver is that we can include women in this sector by educating and training ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of our speakers. This was very interesting. I would now like to give the floor to Idris Abdullahi, a National Ozone Officer placed in the Federal Ministry of Environment in Nigeria. We look forward to hear your presentation.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, distinguished participants. As you've already seen in this slide, I'm Engineer Idris Abdullahi, the National Ozone Officer, Federal Ministry of Environment, Nigeria. And I'm pleased to be here with you to share Nigeria's experience in terms of gender mainstreaming in Montreal Protocol project implementation in Nigeria. Thank you. Next slide. Next.
Yes, can you see it? I mean the outline, in the outline slide.
This the outline. Can you hear? Yeah, this. Yeah, this is the outline of my presentation, that is the gender mainstreaming in the Montreal action plans, and of course the conclusion. Next. Nigeria, as a party to the Montreal Protocol, we are currently implementing the stage 2 of the HPMP project. Over the years, of which all countries are aware, gender mainstreaming or gender issues has never been so important in Montreal Protocol ODS phase out projects. What is of importance to us is technology conversion in relevant enterprises, training, etc. Next.
May I ask you maybe to turn off your camera so that increase our connectivity speed?
Okay.
And you are on the slide MLF gender policies.
Okay. Yeah, policies I've already been dealt with. He has she has given us detailed materials, the great gender issues into Montreal Protocols project implementation. So this slide is very useful, of which I will thank her now for the detailed information on this, of which I will encourage parties to visit the website, because it will be very important for gender mainstreaming in future in Montreal Protocol projects. Next. Yeah, Nigerian experience in terms of gender mainstreaming. In 2018, Nigeria was chosen as part of the global assignment under the UNDP to carry out gender mainstreaming into the Montreal Protocol, specifically the foam sector. The UNDP contracted a consultant to find out possible options for integrating gender into Nigerian projects. But in this aspect, the foam, mainly the foam sector, of which Hannah mentioned in her presentation. During the mission, the gender consultant met with the ministry, my ministry gender office, to find out what do we have on ground in terms of gender mainstreaming, of which the consultant was informed that we have a gender office under the Jeff project to look at gender mainstreaming in that project. Then she further visited the Ministry of Women Affairs and the representative of Nigeria Refrigeration and Air Condition Association based in Abuja. All this is to meet with this relevant stakeholder to find out what they are doing in terms of mainstreaming of gender into the MLF project. Furthermore, we traveled to Lagos with the consultant to meet with the beneficiaries of our HPMP Stage 1 project, that is Vitapo and Commerce, to see how do they integrate issue of gender and in the respective project implementation. These findings and documents can be found in the link below. Next.
Hi, everyone. It looks like Martin got disconnected, so I will try to continue sharing the file.
Okay.
Apologies for this.
Yeah.
Please let me know when you can see it.
Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay, good. Please carry on, Idris. Apologies.
Yeah, I've finished with this slide. Next slide. Yeah, during the mission of the consultant, these are some of the findings that was included in the study. It was we found that as usual, men dominated the foam and refrigeration and air condition sector, because in this part of the world, Nigeria and mainly other African countries, we do not manufacture refrigeration and air condition equipment. We are termed as a servicing sector. So mainly the servicing of this rack equipment are mainly done by artisan. So they look, mainly the females, they look at it as I'm sorry to use that word, as a dirty job, and they don't want to get involved in it. Among some interviewers, consider men greater interest and higher intellect with regards to technical areas. Women, on the other hand, were perceived, they get easily distracted because they term the sector as a science-based sector. We will also find out that the employment ratio in the beneficiary companies was dominated by men, as I earlier mentioned. Only one female working in one of the beneficiaries find the tax very hard, because she has to cope with marital activities and at the same time the work side. Next. So with these experiences that we gathered, we intend to use it under the stage 2 HPMP project. And to do that, gender analysis was one of the areas, or was one of the activities under our work plan. That is, we'll need to find out what is the position on ground in terms of gender dimension in the refrigeration and air conditioning servicing sector. And these are some of the findings included no attention stream into Montreal Protocol, of which that is what we are doing now. And as we already find out in the foam sector, men too dominate the foam and the rack sector in Nigeria, of which earlier explained that this is the presumed idea that they have, that mainly it's artisans that carried out these activities, the servicing of refrigeration and air conditioning equipment. Then this science, technology, and engineering mathematics occupation are largely dominated by men. Of this explains why they do not really take the refrigeration and air conditioner servicing sector serious, because they are mainly, the women are mainly engaged in art subjects, that is public admin, business admin, etc. These are some of the few findings that the consultant came up with. Next. That in the studies or the inventory carried out by a consultant, we came up with the following recommendation. That is, we should put in place the necessary policy framework to promote gender and other related sectors. Then we intend to establish the establishment of a database for female engineers and technicians. Once we have established that, at least we know the female technicians that will be used in other subsequent Montreal Protocol project activities in Nigeria. So we'll have a database for that. Then engagement, we will intend to engage with the formal education sector through the relevant ministry, universities, at least to help to hold periodic meetings on how we can integrate gender issues into the refrigeration and air conditioner sector. Then, of course, with what Hanan have given us, the material she has given us, we intend to organize gender training for HPMP project stakeholders. The material will be useful to us on how to go about it. Then we intend to collaborate with relevant stakeholders to promote women in the refrigeration sector. Yeah, these are some of the recommendations we intend to follow in saying that we integrate gender issues into the Montreal Protocol activities in Nigeria. Next. Yeah, these are some of the pictures during the visit of the consultant from the UNDP, meeting with some of the relevant stakeholders on how we can for discussion. Next picture. Yeah, these are some of the pictures during the visit. Next. Yes, in conclusion, of course, Nigeria, as of now, we have identified two women represented in the two women in the LAC sector, of which you find the publication, you find the pictures in the publication of UNEP action, ozone action. However, we now have more than 50 women actively involved in the refrigeration and air condition sector. With the importance that the Montreal Protocol, the MLF have given to gender issues, we intend to incorporate in our stage 2 of the HPMP implementation in Nigeria all gender action plans. It is expected that gender equality and women empowerment in Nigeria HPMP projects shall be enhanced, and therefore we will increase participation of women in consulting meetings. These are some of the conclusions, and we'll take it further during our implementation of our HPMP2 activities, of which you are all aware this gender issue is a new area to us. So we intend to deal with this areas successfully. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Idris Abdullahi, for sharing your thoughts and some of the findings of the gender analysis and conclusions with us. This was very helpful. And I would like now to go over to our Q&A session. I can see we are running a little bit behind time. So I would quickly like to ask if there's any specific questions from attendees from the audience. And alternatively, Monica has also posted 2 questions that we think are very important and worthwhile to discuss, meaning what gender activities have you been engaged in or know of that made a positive impact? And what are some challenges you see with gender mainstreaming in your project or country? And what do you think are some possible options to address these challenges? So if you have thoughts about this and ideas and suggestions, you're also very, very welcome to speak up now and share these with us.
Anna, maybe you can address some of those questions.
Yes, please. So there's a question. So Karina, there's a question from Karina. Can we activate that? Or is it in the chat?
Yeah.
What are the challenges that we still have to face and solve so that more cases like Peru's can be replicated in other LAC countries? Well, that's of course, it's a very good question, and it's also a very broad question. So, I mean, there's so many components to that, right? You heard earlier from the presentations from colleagues in Peru that a lot of the difficulties are relating to deep-rooted stereotypical thinking and also a lot of structural challenges. Remember how our colleague Iris talked about, you know, how it was difficult for her to join the sector at first, and that it's still perceived as, you know, the type of work that usually men do. So these are, of course, key issues that have to be addressed. And of course, in a way, they go beyond, you know, the particular Montreal Protocol project context, but nevertheless, projects can continuously make an effort towards breaking these stereotypes. For instance, through advocating for gender equality and women's empowerment consistently, through working with women, through inviting women to workshops, through advocating or collaborating particularly with universities, for instance, to recruit qualified women. because also the more often we see women taking on such positions in the sector, the more, we also have the opportunity to inspire future generations, and it becomes the more normal. Through portraying in publications, and again, that's an example I think I saw in Peru, publications where there's still, when there's pictures, it keeps showing men. So it's, it just perpetuates our thinking if we see and keep reading such things. So these are, just some ideas of how this can be addressed. But of course, there's a lot of challenges deeply ingrained in the thinking still. Here someone says, in Lebanon, one of the challenges is a lack of participation of females in the RC sector. So more attention will be given to their participation in the sector, especially on the level of technicians, and encouragement of students at the vocational school enrollment and refrigeration and air conditioning specialization studies. Yes, exactly. So that's an excellent example to actually focus particularly on women, to take some affirmative action to get them into the sector. What else?
If you agree, Hannah, maybe I can read the question of Karina in Spanish for our colleagues, Vladimir and Iris, and with the support with Diana to have the responses just super quickly.
Absolutely.
Para Iris y Vladimir, en su opinión, rápidamente, pregunta Karina, ¿cuáles son los retos que aún debemos enfrentar para que más casos como el de Perú puedan replicarse en otros países? ¿Nos pueden dar su apreciación en un minuto?
Que empiece Iris y yo termino.
Claro que sí.
¿Cuáles son los retos? Es decir, mayor capacitaciones y eliminar más los estereotipos de que impiden que la mujer siga trabajando en esta área.
Sí.
Diana, can you support us with the translation of that?
So some challenges we need to overcome include conducting more capacity strengthening and eliminating stereotypes of women in this field.
Vladimir, el piso es suyo.
Sí, como se mencionó al inicio, nosotros ya desde la visión del Perú hacia el Bicentenario estamos considerando el enfoque de la inclusión, ¿no? Tiene que venir desde el más alto nivel, y esto va a ir decantando hacia abajo para poder nosotros incorporar estos conceptos. Y es importante ubicar esos socios estratégicos y también aquellos líderes que buscan ese cambio a pesar de las dificultades, como es el caso de Iris, ¿no? A pesar de encontrarse en desventaja, ella sigue adelante y sigue promocionando. Necesitamos más Iris, ¿no? Para lograr este cambio. Gracias.
In order to make change, we need to find more strategic partners and people that work like Iris. And we need to, since Peru's bicentennial, we have been focusing on inclusion, and we must continue to incorporate this agenda from the highest level all the way to the bottom. And yes, it's important to incorporate these concepts.
Thank you. Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much. So we have here an organizational question. Would you recommend, from your experience, the national ozone units to appoint a gender focal point within their national ozone teams to help roll out new approaches within each country's ozone programs? So the question is, would you recommend to appoint gender focal points in the national ozone teams? Perhaps some panelists have some feedback on this question. And in the meantime, we have a comment from Idris. He says, as part of promotion of gender into Montreal Protocol projects, I will suggest that for any investment project to be submitted to the for MLF approval, the beneficiary companies should be requested to give a detailed gender plan and how they intend to involve gender participation in their activities. That is a really good suggestion, I think.
Diana, could you help us in translating the question for Peru about the organizational question that was posed?
Sorry, could you please repeat the question?
The question is from, it's about how to, whether the National Ozone Officers or units should delegate a gender focal point, whether that's recommended in order to include gender activities into ozone projects.
Sí, nos comenta la pregunta que Tien nos pone si las unidades nacionales sobre el ozono necesitan nombrar a un punto focal de género dentro de sus equipos. Esto para ayudar a estas nuevas, digamos, aproximaciones, estos nuevos enfoques con cada programa de ozono en cada país. Esa es la pregunta, si debe haber un punto focal sobre género en las unidades. ¿Tienen alguna opinión sobre eso, Iris y Vladimir? Sobre si debe haber algún punto focal en las unidades nacionales de ozono sobre género.
Yeah.
Bueno, entiendo que, por ejemplo, nosotros trabajamos ya cualquier proyecto y por ejemplo, con UDI también, y ya el enfoque género ya viene como una política, ¿no? Nosotros tenemos que cumplir. No sé si necesariamente se puede establecer un punto focal, pero si eso puede sumar a mejorar, bienvenido, ¿no? Es una idea que podría darse. Es importante analizar la estructura del proyecto, pero nosotros asumimos ya que el enfoque está incorporado en este tipo de proyectos.
Thanks. Diana, would you mind?
Yeah, so in any of the projects we conduct, we focus on gender, and it's already a big part of our policy. The inclusion of gender is something that we must fulfill. So having a gender focal point, if it would be helpful, we could use it as part of, which is already a big part of our focus.
Iris, would you like to share some of your experiences on this particular point on having gender focal points as part of the ozone units? Do you have any thoughts you would like to share?
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I think this suggestion to have a gender focal point is a good one. At least for, to have a gender focal point on a lighter note, you have to be a female. So at least we have a female in the ozone office. It has created a room for a female to be there. Then we give a specific role to whoever we appoint. I think it's a good one. And by doing that, we'll be reminded that the focal point among other activities that should be carried out will always remind us that this is a very important issue. So it's a welcome one idea. It's a welcome issue.
Excellent, thank you. I would just like to emphasize here that a gender focal point does not necessarily have to be a woman, right? So this can be women and men. I think that's important for us to remember to not perpetuate again gender stereotypes and make gender a woman's issue or concern. But thank you so much, Idris, and everyone else for sharing your thoughts on this question. And I give over to Monica.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to close this webinar now. Thank you for your participation. Thank you to the panelists for presenting their interesting experiences. And thank you for the participants and for being patient with our interpretation and translation challenges. We really appreciate it. As we mentioned earlier on, we will be following up with another session in the fall, and we will be in touch on ideas and details on the follow-up session. Thank you all and have a nice rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Okay,
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Gracias. Gracias.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Bye-bye.